Hello again, guys. Okay, so we just finished our monochromatic one. It still needs a little touch up. I need to let it dry a little bit and then do some touch ups on it. But there we go. And we can kind of see its scale between the monochromatic, using some white. And again, think about it in terms of, saturation and desaturation within each hue, and just how you kind of walk up and down that scale, so to speak. But now we're going to take out the white and black and just use color. So now we're going to do analogous color. And I thought we'd stay in the oranges. So I'm going to use some orange and some yellow. And again, analogous colors are colors that are right next to each other on the color wheel. So bump, 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 bump. So here we have some analogous colors. But it wouldn't matter what you used. Use any colors you like. Okay, so I'm going to mix up my own orange here. And my own yellow. So with the orange, that red is really strong. So, I try not to use a ton, especially at first. I will probably have to go back in and tinker, but that's probably. So my challenge here is, representing all of the white in terms of warm. So I'm going to use all of my yellows where I see white, and all the shadows I'm going to use my, sort of deepest orange, my reddest orange as I can. So, and the, the yellowest will be my highlight, and the sort of deepest orange will be my shadow, and to sort of walk between that spectrum. So, got my orange here, again right down the middle. Is that showing? Yeah, okay. Right down the middle. A little bit of a reddish orange. For my deepest hue. And again, I'll have, it dries quick. I'll have to go back and beef it up. I'm working my way over here to my brightest yellow. And again, I'll touch that little scale up there. But there, I'm going from red to my sort of deepest orange. Sorry, yellow, the brightest yellow to my deepest orange, which is a reddish orange. But you can see the scale I'm using here. Okay, so now the challenge. I'm going to start the lightest first. Usually I start kind of in the mid-tone, but because yellow is a very transparent color, it's very opaque. So I'm going to do all of my yellows first because it's really hard to sort of beef them up. What I mean by that is if I have a orange under it and I want it more yellow, it's going to take more passes to really more layers of paint to really make that look and feel yellow. So I always kind of do an undercoat of yellow and try to work from there if I'm using this particular hue. Okay, so now start sketching in. Where's the lightest here? So now I'm just looking at all my highlights, but also I'm sketching a little bit. I gave myself a little quick contour line sketch there for my composition, but obviously I still don't know exactly how these forms are shaped and where the light source is and things of that nature. So this is just sort of my sketching little phase. But hopefully what you'll see with this one is, whereas before with monochromatic and when you're using black and white, how we were really taking away that color. It either became very pastel or gray, and this one we're going to keep that color intense, super intense, but just kind of walk up and down that scale. And even though these are both very warm hues, this one tends toward more of a cooler color. The kind of redder and purpler we get, the lighter and brighter that yellow is. I think it's just a little bit of a warmer color. I should really have changed out my water before I started this video. But again, just remember to keep clean water, especially with something like yellow. The second you start adding dirty water into a yellow, you're gonna see it. So I'm gonna use this sparingly. But hopefully by the end of it, you'll see how all of these different ways of thinking about color, adding into each other, and then being able to use the entire spectrum of color and value, really makes a full utility in your tool belt. So, okay, I think most of my highlights here are coming around that edge for the shadow. So now we're starting into our little bit of a lighter tone here. So I'm just going to sort of walk down the scale until I get to my deepest orange here. On these, I'm still trying to go with the contour of the form and letting that brush do a little bit of the work for me. So if I'm using it left, I kind of turn this angle brush to the left. If I'm going to the right, I just turn to the right. Again, just trying to use the brush as much as possible. And again, I'm kind of working light here. Got quite a bit of water on my brush. So now I'm starting to work with that orange. I'm already sort of taking away some of that yellow. So I'm being mindful of my highlights, especially with this yellow, so I don't get too far into my layers here. Okay. Man, sometimes I have trouble painting and talking. I don't know if you noticed that. Today I'm really struggling there. But now I'm trying to go with the contour of the form here in a different way. I was really looking at that shadow first. That's why I did this sort of contour. But now I'm looking at the shape of the entire orange and just sort of how it's formed, how it springs out from this little point. But really trying to leave that big highlight for yellow. Right now they look like weird little pumpkins. Maybe it's just the Halloween season. Okay. Now we're getting into these kind of shadowy areas, so I'm really starting to dip into my redder oranges, which would be kind of like my shadow areas here. And now I'm really starting to see some big strong shadows, so I'm going to go for my deepest orange here. That's not red, it's just a reddish orange. I'm trying to be mindful of that as well. So here's a big strong shadow, and where I'll probably put in my deepest orange. But the purpose of the exercise is, again, to see color in terms of just how you saw value. You know, instead of thinking about things in terms of light and dark, think about them in terms of warm and cool. And so even with two really warm colors, you're going to have to balance them out somehow. And so red just felt like a deeper color, so that would be more of my shadows, leaving my yellows as my highlight. But if I was to use like red and purple, then I would reverse it, and reds would be my highlight and purples would be my shadow. And if I was using blues and greens, then blues would be my shadows, greens highlights. You know, so you're just constantly thinking about what's warmer and cooler, what's coming towards me, what's moving away from me. Okay, so let's get into these shadows here. I'm leaving that little bit of white space because I want this really nice and textural up here. I'll leave that for last. But again, just trying to get rid of any paper white. So now you can see how I'm starting to layer some of that orange over that yellow and leaving it just watery enough for it to come through a little bit. So let's go through. I see paper white in some places. So as you can see, it has dried lighter, so I need to go back in and go back through all of this. With these demos, sometimes just because I know the time on them gets a little long, I do stop if I feel like it's good enough to see the example. But I will go back in and finish some. Just I touched up that monochromatic one a little bit. I'll work on it even more after this, and same with this. A lot of times too, it just needs, you got to walk away from it for a good hour or so and just snap your mind out of it. 15 minutes, anything, just to get away from it. And so with all of these, I do take a step back, do something else completely, and then look at it again, make a few touch-ups here and there. But just because of you can't watch an hour and a half video of me just walking back and forth looking at it. But you can obviously see how I'm trying to really look at this in terms of, just like you looked at value and lights and darks, I'm trying to look at it in terms of warms and cools within a very close proximity of hues, being my orange and yellow. But my reddish orange really went to kind of pure orange here, so I'm going to remix that a little bit. So where I see a really strong shadow, I'm just trying to carve out that little negative space shape and push it back. That's pretty good. Mostly what I needed in is the bowl. I think I'll be done with this now. Yeah, I'm just trying to put the contour of the form and sort of push these cross contour lines in this bowl to really get that perspective. So I've got a real big bird's eye view here. Okay, there we go. You know, I could go back in and touch up those yellows, but this all needs to dry before I do that. But you can really start to see how all this works in terms of value and in terms of hue and warms and cools. Great. So next, complementary